What is up, Coordination? On the pod today, we've got speaker John Ash talking about purple pills. What is the purple pill? The purple pill is a set of ideas about how AI can enhance sense-making and create more coordination in the world. So speaker John Ash wrote the Purple Pill Manifesto, which introduces the idea of Cognicisim, a system of sense-making that uses generative text modeling as a form of high-resolution predictive democracy. So basically using large text models like GPT-3 to summarize large volumes of information very rapidly and efficiently. And this affects public discourse and law because it allows people to coordinate with each other with higher context. And so this idea of Cognicisim leverages this primitive called an iris, which is a generative text model that aggregates collective belief into a singular voice. So what would the world look like if we had AIs in our pockets that were sort of negotiating how we coordinate with each other, negotiating across mimetic tribes, how we coordinate with each other, and representing our preferences as we coordinate? And so, this is all encapsulated in the idea of a purple pill. And, this podcast is called the Green Pill. And one of the things that we talk about on this episode is this idea that pills are just a metaphor for worldviews and perspectives. And so how does the purple pill and the green pill relate to each other? And what is the way that we can integrate many viewpoints, the green pill viewpoint, which is about Web3 and regeneration, and the purple pill, which is about AI and regeneration? We're going to be moving forward in the world in such a way that I think that there will be AI augmented coordination, and there will be Web3 augmented coordination. So what is the pluralism of the green pill and the purple pill is something that we talk about on this episode. And I just got to say that speaker John Ash, who is the guest for this episode, is a really articulate and deep thinker when it comes to this idea set of using Cognicisim and irises in order to build an AI augmented worldview and AI augmented coordination. It's also one of the most highly supported projects in the most recent Gitcoin grants rounds. The Metacrisis Gitcoin grants round. So really excited to be talking to John Ash today. I think that we'll probably do a couple episodes together on Cognicisim and irises, and I think you're going to enjoy this episode, Coordination. So what is the future of AI augmented and crypto augmented coordination? This is the episode for that. Enjoy.
ValleyDAO is an open global collective working to finance and democratize the governance of synthetic biology technologies to protect the future of our planet. Research and progress into synthetic biology is critically constrained by the world of nation-state regulations and bureaucracy from middlemen. But the potential that synthetic biology has for the world is massive. It can produce a world in total harmony with nature. We can grow stuff using cells like software. It's awesome. And the best part is we no longer have to pull carbon out of the ground to grow and maintain civilization. Don't you think we should be funding this? ValleyDAO does, and that's what they're here to do, to try and make the SolarPunk world of tomorrow a reality today. So join ValleyDAO right now and save the planet at valleydao.bio.
What's up, speaker John Ash?
Hello, how are you doing? I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. So maybe we'll tee off with what is the purple pill?
The purple pill is a meme that I created because The Matrix 4 was coming out, and I had a song called Purple Pill, which was about integrating various perspectives. And I had this previous existing manifesto, the Cognicisim manifesto, which was very technical and very cold, and people were having trouble relating with. And at the same time, as I was recording this single, I was taking this manifesto and I was breaking it down into parts, and I was training, a language model on the meaning held within the manifesto. And then I started using that to write, and it started writing things that read like a manifesto, except for a lot more human and a lot more generalized and a lot more connected. And it kept sort of like bringing forth these concepts that were related to consilience and related to having different perspectives on the same thing. So there was sort of like this emergent semantic latent space of metaphors connected to the original manifesto. And the more I read it, the more I was like, this really rings true with the song that I'm working on. And one of the sort of theories of systems change behind Cognicisim is things don't really change without mimetic energy behind them. And in the capitalist world, that's been captured by artists have been captured into this sort of advertising thing, which helps perpetuate the system. So people talk about like the ways to change system are like, oh, they need violent revolution. I'm saying you just need a revolution of energy and an artistic revolution and a movement for creators to create art, whether it be in the name of like the Renaissance or whether it be in the name of SolarPunk or whether it be in the name of specific things like Cognicisim. That is the actual means by which we transform the world. And it can't be through like, well, we need to get enough funding to get the marketing push. It has to be something that comes from underneath. So that's why I felt the motivation to both release a song, None of This Is Real, Take the Purple Pill, which embodied the message that was being put out there, but also just giving a meme that people could relate to. Like I had seen Green Pill, and I had seen how strongly people just sort of connected to it and how people were very strongly resonant with that. And so the idea of just taking this song that I had, which talked about, well, what if you took both of the pills, red pill and the blue pill? What are all of the different pathways that you have ignored in this false choice that is presented to you at that moment? Because you don't have to take either pill. Like literally, he could take the pills and run and take them to a lab. Like there are so many pathways that are ignored by the plot of that film that forces you to believe that in that moment, he only has two choices, which is just absurd. He has infinite choices. And so the purple pill just became this meme to make sense of Cognicisim, and people just really resonated with it, probably because it was written by, a latent space that held all of human knowledge. So it contextualized the ideas in a way that made them feel more grounded to most people.
One of the things that really stood out as you were speaking is just this line from the Purple Pill Manifesto, this idea that pills are a metaphor for worldviews or perspectives. And the purple pill is a perspective that values reflexivity and integration of many viewpoints. And I noticed that you used the word consilience in there, which means the agreement between approaches of different subjects. And so it's like an integrative type perspective.
Yeah, the Cognicisim Manifesto was written with very different language. And I have basically studied a lot of people in this world, the sense-making world, the meta-crisis world. So like, what is the language that for them resonates? But the first manifesto, like there are certain things like coordination that's not listed in there at all. Sense making is not listed in there at all. It's about that. But those specific words aren't used. What we explore in that original manifesto is how do people come to a sense of shared truth? It's about wisdom of the crowd in general and all of its various forms. We're not just talking about like polling. I'm talking about things like when we come together and we are in relationship with each other, we share a common mythos, we share a common culture. There is a greaterness than to the sum of our parts. Through the coordination, through the collaboration of people sharing their energy, sharing their thoughts, and sharing a common language and sharing a common like cultural practice, we like achieve more together. And it was an exploration about all the different ways by which we did that. And whether it be like myths, whether it be religion, whether it be science, whether it be democracy, whether it be frequentist polling or Bayesian statistics, like there were all of these different forms by which people come into community and form a common sense of truth and act together. And the one that has taken over really is the idea of the corporation. And so we were basically exploring at that time, what is it that helps people come into coherence together to collaborate towards goals? Why does it keep seeming to lend us towards degradation over time? And how do we integrate those various perspectives that we have that are in conflict and resolve them in a healthy way towards a greater outcome for both of us? It was a manifesto of like, what are the ways that we resolve conflict? What are the ways that we come to truth? And then at the sort of pinnacle of that document in 2017 was said, okay, we've determined that all of these things are failing. We've also determined that there is this new technology that is coming in the next 5 years, which is generative language models. They're going to dramatically change everything. And the fact of the matter is what these generative language models can do is they can encode worldviews. Getting back to that meta-crisis tribe thing, that for that entire map that you had, or he had, of all of these different tribes, that each of those can be reflected by a language model where those ideas and concepts can be reflected in latent space, and it can do a very good job at creating output that you particularly agree with. So the thing presented forth by all of this is, okay, you have this dense map of meaning where each have all these different hills of different ideologies. And these different hills, which are these different ideologies, are not connected. And so these two different groups of people, they can't see eye to eye because there's no functional semantic bridge between those two spaces. You're a Democrat and you're a Republican. You can't even talk about the same thing because you're not even operating on the same language set. So what was presented is, wow, this latent space knows the spaces in between. Therefore, it is an incredible tool to form synthesis between differing perspectives and integrate over time these different perspectives towards something that is more whole and more connected through time. Then I had to spend about 5 years with people not believing me that language models could encode worldviews. Now we're there. Now people get it. Now people are like, give me that personal language bot. I want the personal language bot. And now I'm like on the next thing, which is, okay, there's another part of this which can make this even more powerful and more community-centric, which is that if you introduce information to the model about who is saying what and when they are saying it, like if you take just a generic transformer and in the encoding, you just say each piece of text is tagged from a particular source, a person who's trying to stake the truth, and when it was said, then you can create something really powerful, a brand new system, which I call Cognicisim, that aims to, through time, form generative synthesis of these different views. People who are disagreeing but well-intentioned towards healing things, they just disagree about how it's going to get done, and allowing them to have this space, not based off of like betting, that you're not betting that something's going to happen. You're just staking the truth. You're staking to a cryptographic store where it can't be like changed, and the older back you go, the more secure it gets. I think this is going to happen. I'm predicting this thing. The entire focus right now is storing money on the chain. And the idea behind Cognicisim, you can store anything. I would say we store latent space and we store belief space, such that we can allocate attention in communities working together towards people whose actions and words actually align with the outcomes that the entire community wants. We can do that with these language models if you give them source and time information. And that's just a very basic, simple thing that people in the community are not talking about, the machine learning community, because there's nothing really motivate that towards happening. It's a lot more motivated to come into being a model that is completely owned by the company that says, oh, we have no idea who is saying what. An iris, what it does is it cites the sources from which it is generating its output. The same thing you could do with perhaps like an image model like DALL-E. The idea would be that when all of your input data is tagged by the source of it, and you train the model to actually predict or say from which sources it's forming its output, then you have a new type of credit, right? We know that the output of these generative models now is very valuable. We know that people are seeing the text that it's creating as a pathway to get rich. So there is an inherent understanding that is valuable. I'm saying that we can create a new, very valuable signal within that, which says, hey, by the way, this text model is saying this thing. Well, it's saying this thing because it's pulling from these specific sources, these specific people. This is where it's coming from. And this is who you can attribute that information from coming from. And if it's wrong information, Well, it's because it's actually pulling from this specific voice. And then you can either sort of challenge it or agree with it or attest to it. But it's a dynamic, fluid truth market that is existing in a latent space, which makes it very difficult to cheat or game it in the same way that you have a problem with Sybil like attacks. Like with money, you just need to move one item from one place to, and that's right, and do it like very like, and get away with it. Latent space is like warm data, like Nora Bateson. It's like all directly interconnected. And if you change one tiny little thing, it dramatically changes the whole. It's not like you can just move one bit. So inherently, if you have a latent, like if you have a blockchain that's encoding embeddings or like latent space, like, there's all this, people know that there's value in converting text into the embedding form. So you can do semantic search right now. And also there's something like BitTensor, which is a distributed information theoretic data store for collaboratively training models so that you get these tensors that have information theoretic value. They're trying to create a structure or infrastructure whereby over time, that which is learned in the model and gets more and more and more valuable to everybody. This is kind of adjacent to that, except for it's more directly tied to regeneration and like what people are expressing as their desired explicit futures in natural text. Like it's about creating a human interface to these emerging, very cold technologies that I'm seeing other machine learning engineers drive towards. It was very long. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's a complex. It's a complex.
Yeah,
concept.
no, we're spelunking deep into the idea set, and maybe I'll go a little bit back up just to form a base of common understanding with the audience, and then we can spelunk back down. So, first off, like meta commentary, I think what's interesting for me is that GreenPilled is a very like how can you use crypto to regenerate the world type of idea set. And it feels like Purple Pill is almost like how do we use AI to advance our goals also. And so the combination of the AI centric and the crypto centric idea set is the synthesis of that is going to be cool. But anyway, so an iris is a generative text model that aggregates collective belief into a singular voice. Cognicisim is a way to collaborate with more collective intelligence. And sort of what we're creating here is a dynamic fluid truth market where if people have different AIs that are synthesizing things together, then we can create more higher resolution sense making between us because the AIs don't have the limits that everyday people have in synthesizing. And that's what makes me excited about Cognicisim. Okay, so I'm wondering how did your fascination with human coordination lead you to the concept of Cognicisim?
Yeah, I'm very autistic. And when I was young, looking at the world around me made no sense, especially going through puberty and seeing like a new emergent social rules appear out of nowhere for no fucking reason in my mind. Like suddenly kids are acting very, very differently and they can't really make sense of it. And I struggled for a really long time to understand why the way that people were engaging with each other just kept changing. And they kept being so confident about their actions as being normal. I'm like, you didn't act like this last year. Do you not understand that you're not engaging as the same person as you were? And so for a very long time, that is just what I wanted to understand is like, why were people treating me in such different ways from day to day? Like when I didn't really have a lot of friends. And then when I got into middle school, lots of women or girls started treating me very kindly, and I never really understood it at the time. But I was like, suddenly I have friends. That's really nice to have sort of connection. So I studied, when I graduated from school, I studied psychology and neurobiology and like linguistics. And like all I wanted to know was, why do people behave and interface and understand the world the way they do? Why do they act the way they do? And that fascination with that led me to eventually come to this realization that the existing systems that we have are insufficient for this modern world, and that there are a lot of sort of sociopathic people who are taking advantage of like psychology, like natural psychology, like things like neuro-linguistic programming and just human behavior to take over systems and have a greater influence over collective decision making than makes sense. Like, I just was observing, why are people in power? And I was seeing a couple of factors. One, the most realist thing, which I really wish people would get, is that human memory is so fucking fallible. Our memory is so bad. It's embarrassing how bad it is, and it really gets in the way of collective sense making. That's why capitalist ledgers really exist, because people want to lie all the time, and when it comes down to at least the things we have, the stuff, we care enough to put all of this energy into securing it. Right now, we have this big ledger of speech, and we know that people confidently declare things that don't end up to be true, that people act upon. Like, people confidently declared there was not going to be a pandemic, or whether you think it was real or not, the people say there's no way that it was ever going to be shut down. It's hard to ignore the fact that it was shut down, whether it was whatever your belief is about that. But when we look back at that ledger owned by Twitter or owned by Facebook, right, you can clearly see at that specific point in time that they were claiming the specific thing, and yet the power differential doesn't change at all when they're proven to be wrong at all. So we have this big privately owned ledger of our own public speech, and Cognicisim is about giving you your ownership of your own data back to you and making it actually be a really healthy and collaborative game that can exist on top of the obsession that we have with tokenized ownership of everything. Because it's not to say that. Do you know Matt Perkowski?
I don't, and I bet the audience doesn't either. So you should just give us an overview of who they are.
They're just a brilliant person who really understands the entropic aspects of, proof of work. He did a really great episode with Jim Rutt, and he's done a lot of talks on it. And he also has a really good understanding about the nature of collaborating over long periods of time. Like, if you go back and you read a lot of his articles from 2017, they're spot on right now. He's what I would call very prescient or predictive, and that's sort of a signal that we want to be amplifying in our society, but we don't really in our social networks actually amplify the voices that are helping the most or contributing the most. It's more we are amplifying voices. When you bind speech to the profit incentive, means that the distribution of that speech needs to bear return, and that means that you can't distribute speech honestly. It means that you can't be motivated to, as an institution, to distribute speech that might, affect your overall profit. And it's not something that's even factored directly into their loss function. I think it's just, that's how things trend.
I feel like we're in this reminds me of this idea that was kind of like a GreenPilled adjacent idea, this idea of the Matthew effect, which is about how the rich get richer. But it not only applies to ideas of money, but it also applies to like fame and status and power, where you could say like the famous are getting more famous faster than the median citizen. And maybe that the idea here is the bridge I'm trying to build is that if you're distributing governance power within an organization, then there's this runaway effect where the powerful get more powerful. It's actually harder to distribute power in an organization than you would think, because you're transferring that context.
So I worked in fintech. This is where a lot of my ideas came from. I worked for a company that had access to like thousands and thousands of financial institutions. And my job was to create a coherent, like, sense-making model about like, what do these transactions mean? Who are they coming from? And The thing that I tended to notice over and 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 over is the dollar has sort of like what is it, Kevin Bacon effect, where it's like, even if you donate $1 to a charity, it's like a number of transactions before it just flows upwards. And it's just very, very consistent. It's all upswinging. So there's this idea of the profit incentive, which is that you're incentivizing people to share things about the future that are accurate. And then there's this thing called social proof of impact, which is you're incentivizing people to take actions to avoid these futures, or trying to create the greatest possible unpredicted change. So when we look at something like a sacrifice zone, we look at something like Flint, Michigan, or Haiti, or just some place that has been degraded a lot. It's been broken down a lot. The way that relates to prediction is that when most people look at those places, they don't believe it will be healed. It's very unlikely in their mind. There's no way that that place is going to turn back into a self-sustaining community that has all of the resources that it needs. The more degraded a locality is, the more likely that is to be true. If you're looking at a country or the land, you might have a heat map of in need of regeneration versus not in need, like so how degraded it is to how regenerated it is. A place that is doing well has resources to extract from. They can use those resources to keep their economy going. A place that has
reflective.
Yeah. A place that doesn't have enough, they need to bring in resources from the outside. And often you'll get, donations coming in, and it doesn't create a sustainable engine. So the fact is, it's actually very hard to create a future to go from point A in this degraded place to a future where it's better. In Cognicisim, there's this idea called a social proof, which is that when you declare an intention to do something that's incredibly difficult and actually achieve it, in basically like you have on record a bunch of people saying, fuck you, you're not going to be able to do this. This is impossible. Like, for example, a lot of people said, fuck you, Elon, you're not going to be able to do this. Twitter will be broken within a week, and it will be gone within a week. All of his predictions were wrong. It's still going, and he's still trying to improve it. But if you have this ledger of like perception where most of us agree that this person is not going to be able to fix this problem, but most of us agree we would like it to happen, that gives a pathway for a person who's in power to do what we call a social proof. Proof that the amount of power, the amount of money that they have is justified because they are able to use their resources in a very intelligent way to actually dynamically heal and transform something that people do not believe is possible through capitalism. It's creating an incentive to heal, an incentive to heal by forming a collective perception of what needs healing and what needs changing, basically. And the idea behind it is to create this incentive that those with the most really see a great value of gifting or donating their money downwards in a very intelligent way that is most likely to result in a healing, because they know that once it happens, people will be surprised and they'll be like, oh, that's great. I really want to do it. And it'll be on record, and they'll have this new valuable sort of proof within some sort of ledger that they are trustworthy, that their energies are aligned with the people. It comes down to alignment. That's a hard thing to do, but I do think that's where the game needs to be at. How do you incentivize those with the most to contribute to the hardest problems and not to just contribute their energy to the easiest money? Because what seems to be happening is the people who get a lot of money, what do? They lend their energy towards the easiest money that they can get with having all of those resources. And things just kind of get worse and worse and worse. We want to incentivize those who have a lot to do things that are hard to change, and they want to incentivize them to give up what they have to help other people. And up to a point, if very wealthy people are very consistently achieving these dramatic changes in localities and healing these localities in this way, I think it should be fair to say that they should have a little bit more resources from day to day, to be able to achieve that.
So I guess if I could try to play back what I heard there for the audience's benefit, but also to make sure that we're tracking each other. It feels like there's this reflexiveness to the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The public goods get better in rich communities, and they get worse in like Flint, Michigan. And if you can scale everyone in society's ability, or maybe not everyone, but the most high leverage people, just their ability to create sense making and their ability to build this dynamic, fluid truth market, then you can scale up the social context, and you can have the people who have the benefits in the value landscape. The people who have the haves, they can help the have-nots sort of get not a handout, but like a hand up, because you're scaling the sense making and the ability to lift everyone up, because you're creating more ability to sense make between each other. I also feel like you're breaking Dunbar's number here by breaking the limits of human cognition and the ability to coordinate with each other, and that allows people to help each other up. Am I playing that back correctly? Is there anything you would correct there?
It's all correct in that I say it's not the only mechanism, and most of it, and people will hear me focusing on like local regeneration and local action, and just people being on a local piece of land and seeing the way that they contribute their action to healing, right? It's not just about like that, but it is what I view as the most powerful aspect for real dynamic change, is to incentivize those that have the energy to lend it towards the people who don't. And I understand that they don't want to, because they also predict that it won't be used well. Like that they predict that Gregory Landua, he has a parable of the rain. It's a story about like a flood of liquidity upon a landscape that is not necessarily ready for it.
I love this story.
Yeah, I love it as well. And I think there's some sort of truth to that. It's like a lot of the reason why the haves are not incentivized to give any resources down is the prediction that it won't be used well. And it's like,
so
that's not always true.
Can I just tell Gregory's story real quick?
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
So the parable is basically, if you flood liquidity onto a landscape that's barren, then it's going to create a ton of runoff, and it's going to be this violent flood that sort of heads towards the ocean. But if you do it into an environment where there's deeply rooted biological mechanisms, think like a forest with a swamp and organisms everywhere, it'll actually soak in the liquidity and be used for something, and the land sort of becomes like a spring. It can handle the liquidity and make good use of it. And so there's this impedance matching between the ability to receive liquidity and the liquidity coming down onto the environment. I wish we'll have to. Gregory told this story on his green pill. I feel like I'm butchering it, getting it out now.
No, this is pretty good.
But I just wanted to make sure that the audience had that in their minds, because I don't know if everyone's listened to Gregory's episode.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of like that inherent sense in people who have more. Like if you are a type of person who has learned how to achieve more and increase the size of your pile, you're probably going to learn that sort of engaging in transaction downwards does not really tend to lead you towards greater success for yourself unless you're extracting from them, which is what we see a lot of like wealthy charlatans or like doing, grifting an impressionable poor community and extracting those resources even further upwards. So there is this motivation, I think, naturally to not want to help. And I think that there's also a hurt that comes from, when you do try to help people, you get burnt. So like transforming a singular life, like if somebody's addicted to meth, let's just talk about regeneration from a human point, not from the whole community. That's a very hard thing to do. And that person's not going to be able to do it on their own. Inherently, they need some sort of help, and there's not a lot of incentive or motivation to do that because that person has nothing to offer. There's no transaction that can happen from the person who can help to this person to help bring them up. And so we have all these weird systems that we build around government and all these programs to try to step up, and we try to drive those through our empathy. And I'm trying to think of a new sort of functional mechanism which says that the transformation of a life, the transformation of a future is a very, very hard thing to do. And it takes time and it takes energy being repeated. And that is something that you can really capture to a ledger as being like, listen, I think that I should be trusted to work in this particular field, to do these particular things, because I have a very clear record of actually being able to, of my work actually being associated with positive outcomes. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be something as I'm going to go heal the homeless. It could just be that I'm going to run a certain type of business that has a social goal, right? I know that I have to make money in society, but I have an intention that the reason why I'm creating this is to help people in some way, to actually improve the community, to give back in some way. The semantic ledger, the iris, is what enables you to keep track of that and stay on track, and to keep your attention actually going towards the social good and not be thrown off and shaken by society saying, oh, you have to get profit, or you're going through a hard time, or the fees are too high, so you can't donate to this project, right? A lot of our willpower to do social good gets a rug pull from the profit incentive, where we don't feel safe to be able to contribute our actual money. And I would say, well, yeah, because if you give $1 probably to that drug addicted person, it won't necessarily help them long term. That's what, going back to the beginning of the conversation, and the thing I keep saying is that the gift of money is not, and it cannot reach the same level as the gift of cognition, the gift of care and attention towards actually changing somebody's future through the actions or attention that you're gifting to somebody. So I would say if we have a regen ledger, and maybe that is literally like the regen network's regen ledger, but with the data model exploded, or maybe it's, bound to ordinals on the blockchain or whatever it is. If we have this ledger that is really trying to say, we are trying to heal people, right? We are trying to get them into a space where their own expressions, their own natural expressions of their own life seem to reflect some level of thriving, right? There are a lot of systems out there that are trying to tokenize or like even create a loss function out of this. I think the reason why language models, generative language models, work so well for this concept is everybody knows how to talk. If you take that homeless person, if you take anybody, if you strip away everything else from them, like they still have their story. They still have something that like to them like matters and is meaningful. And if only somebody could listen to them long enough to hear their pain and to give some good suggestions, to just be there for them, then maybe they could get on track. And what the iris is trying to do is learn into its model that which helps heals us and the voices that are contributing most to that functional transformation. And it's a hard problem to solve, but we're there. Like we are there with the technology between the cryptographic data stores that we have, between like large language models for capturing these perceptions from people. Like we have what we need to really build a brand new system. And it's just coming into community with each other and just really sticking it out. It is hard to get through. It was hard to get through some of those UI problems on some of this round, but like that's going to be resolved. And like there is a willingness from people who really do want to do good, to heal. I'm just saying that the best laid intentions of mice and men go off to rye for promised joy. So we all think that the actions that we're taking in the name are social good are going to turn out good. I'm saying if we had this sort of ledger of accountability for the causal flows of our actions, then maybe we can actually trend towards a direction of regeneration. If we actually try to understand, hey, does this action in this DAO, does it actually lead to the outcome that we're looking for? Or did this detract for a while? Did this hold back our effort? I think that if we have a secondary type of ledger that is intermediated by these irises, which represent your worldview, so that you have some agency and autonomy over your own expression over it, we can create a incentivized form of dynamic regeneration that once people get to a space of self-sufficiency, it's not still number goes up. It's rather that once that person becomes healed, then their energy comes to focus towards bringing other people up. And then over time, we all sort of bring everybody up until there's nobody below this line that makes us feel like society isn't doing its job to just take care of people and make sure that we're not all addicted to fentanyl and like, how the streets of San Francisco are right now, which is like just a lot of people left behind.
Yeah, I have a lot of threads that I want to pull, but one of them is this idea that you can't solve climate change without solving inequities. So basically, the idea that if you're going to regenerate the earth, if you're going to solve a lot of these public goods problems, then you also need to lift up the impoverished so that they make decisions that are in line with the global good. That's one thread I'd want to pull. The other is just sort of the integration of blockchain and crypto for more coordination, and the idea of AI for more coordination, and the integration of what you call a dynamic fluid truth market, or Cognicisim, and sort of like the green pill idea of using crypto mechanisms to create regeneration. So happy to pull either thread, but I'm seeing lots of parallels between green pill and purple pill as we continue the conversation.
If I had to make a prediction about like what is the next big movement in crypto, where there's going to be this run for attention and funding, it would be something similar or akin to BitTensor, which is like you're storing the knowledge that is encoded in the GPT onto the chain somehow. That is
building a bridge between the two ledgers, the knowledge ledger and the balance ledger. Yeah.
So that's like sort of the big motion. There are lots of ways to do that incredibly wrong, but just end up being a paperclip maximizer and causing the exact same problems that we're existing within today. We absolutely,
I think that Web3 is going to continue to grow and be a thing. We're going to coordinate using decentralized ledgers. Now the LLM cat is out of the bag, and I have gratitude to you for pushing forward these purple pill ideas before LLMs were just obvious to everyone. But in the future, how does AI coordination interoperate with Web3 coordination? And maybe the meta question there is, how do the green pill visions and the purple pill visions resonate and compound upon each other in hopefully positive some ways?
So we're going to do this talk at LIB called Regenerative AI Generating Protopian Futures. And the thing that lies within all of that is something that is doing better in the future than it was in the past. I think Green Pill has that sort of same mentality of, in the future, we're ending up in a place that is better. The mechanism by which we are doing that is through crypto. The idea behind AI, or the idea behind machine learning, is you have something called a loss function. And the loss function measures at various intervals how well you're doing. So there will be a lot of a movement to, I think, try to generically define the success of a community collaborating together, like BitTensor, which they just call information theoretic value, which is very, very big. And the real challenge is to find functional ways to measure over time whether you're actually heading in that direction, or whether you're that frog in the boiling pot. Like, if you start a blockchain for regeneration, for example, And 2 years later, it turns out that you've actually burned more energy or caused more problems. Like, should you double down on that reality or should you keep going? That is the inherent importance of looking backwards and adjusting as you go. So there's a bunch of talks, and I've edited some of them together. There's one from Daniel Schmachtenberger that I've edited called The Metrics of Societal Health, which he just explores where when you try to place a metric of success upon society, it tends to devolve into something wrong or not representative. And that's what sort of profit itself seems to be. It's sort of a target that does not align with social good, right?
Right. It's a paperclip maximizer in some ways.
So the movement likely will be to store to the chain some collective representation of how well the community is doing. And I predict a lot of sort of kludge, very, very simple things. And I'll just repeat and reiterate this part of the conversation to anybody who is listening. Like the foundation, if you're a machine learning engineer, please just bring in source information and timestamp information into your model and encode the timestamp information using sinusoidal embedding so that there's a sort of cyclical nature of time connected to the narrative that is contained within the tokens there, because that is an actual fluid, dynamic way that can actually reflect the will of the people as it emerges and evolves, no matter what language the person speaks, no matter what new words they invent. That can actually be reflective and democratic, and in the expression of it will reflect and mirror the expressions of the community in a way that a black box model will not. We're basically headed towards a lot of paperclip maximizers, black box models, with not very much foresight. Make it about prediction. Stretch out the frame upon which the impact people's words have on the community. Meaning, like, if we have a Discord and we have a DAO or something like that, and we have a conflict, and the conflict is because there is in one person expectation that this moment, this particular thing will lead to something 2 years out. Like, generally that type of decision making doesn't get integrated in. We're mostly functioning on a much shorter period of time, and by the time we reach this point in time, we've forgotten. Well, guess what? A freaking blockchain doesn't forget. And like an intelligent iris can remind you in the future. Like, you can have these AI models which are calling forth our past voices in a much more intelligent way, and therefore spreading out almost our long-term memory and making it more aligned with our collective goals. Right now, we don't know how to navigate the complexity of the world through time, where we reliably end up in a place that is regenerated, especially when there's like emerging complexity and new things that we just know how to relate to. I'm trying to give people the discrete tools to be able to express the way that people normally do, which is not by, like, say, clicking numbers or filling out a form. It's just, they just say shit, right? I am not doing good right now because I am hungry. Like, I see a lot of systems that are people are like, well, like Jordan Hall Civium was based around like weekly check-ins where you had specific forms that you had to answer the specific questions to. And that felt so unruly to me. I just wanted a system that could say, you're suffering, tell me about it. Like, and maybe my microphone has a voice to text, but you're suffering.
Feels more natural.
What do you need? What do you need? Just communicate what your need is. And even if I can't like give you that right away, that it can be on record that you claimed that if you received this, your life would have dramatically improved in some way. And we can at least try as a community to bridge those gaps and help the people who have been left behind catch up. And I think that's sort of the power of merging the LLM with the blockchain infrastructure, because the knowledge now is going to become increasingly invaluable. Like, what is stored in those parameters? A good LLM that can help you is going to be more valuable than like Bard's first example, which was like angry at you and wasn't nice, right? So the value of the compression of the way that the model treats you and the way that the model helps you and the way that the model directs you is going to become paramount. I believe that we can have it teach us to come into greater cohesion, but right now it's being trained to just perpetuate the system, to make more products, to make software, to market your company. And I'm saying, if instead you train these models to integrate the community, to point to voices that are doing that integration, to elevating the voices that are taking action, that solve the hardest problems. You know I said from the richest to the poorest, but like anywhere along that spectrum, like there's easier proofs. You know what I mean? Like somebody who is at this level to this level, this type of transformation is going to be a lot easier, and you can still prove that to be like, I should have reputation in this community and my voice should be amplified more because I help these people and I really do care about my community, and I really do care about like creating an interwoven and interconnected culture that doesn't leave anybody behind. I think that's the true power of where crypto is going to evolve to, is the combination between green pill and purple pill. And one last final thing was to say that the original manifesto very much clearly says it'll be a two-token society, meaning that you have the sort of contextual reputation, you have traditional tokens. All the time in public, I'm like, fuck money, fuck the concept of money, fuck the concept of money. Even though like publicly in the documents, it never says that we're eating money. I just get frustrated that everybody puts their focus on it when there could be a secondary system that could help a lot.
I think it's a really rich design space, and interested to continue to explore it. I mean, I think that there's a lot there, but I don't know how to, given that we're out of time, I think we got to start converging instead of diverging. So maybe with only 3 minutes left, I can ask, is there anything I didn't ask that you want to say?
No, there are a lot of really, really great metaphors. And I like you saying converging instead of diverging. I think there's a real sort of mimetic gravity away from each other. And in the Purple Pill Manifesto, one of the memes we choose is confluence, which is streams flowing together into a center to represent the iris.
Yeah.
Like, we share and pool this knowledge together. And then by pooling, there's a greater sum of the parts. You don't even need an iris to get the advantage of this. For people listening, and if you're a coder and you have access to, how to do like a GPT-4 type of thing, write system level instructions that just communicate that there are multiple people in the thread, and you're trying to integrate and tell a story that makes sense to all of them. Just write the instructions to say, synthesize these perspectives, and then plug that into a thread where there are multiple people talking. And what we have seen very consistently is the greater the number of diverse voices that are sharing in that single contextual window, the greater level of intelligence it seems to reflect. If you're just one person talking to it, it's going to talk out of one part of latent space and just have that little limited wisdom. The more people you bring into this collective version of collaborating through AI, the greater intelligence it seems to have. And it already is in this place that it can help encourage people who are sharing that shared window just to work together. We're not seeing a lot of that yet. We're seeing mostly like one-on-one versions of the AI where people are, it's assisting them one-on-one. But I think that even now, just play with the idea of having a moderator that is GPT powered, that you're telling the moderator, here's a thread. This group of people need care and compassion and support. This is what this thread is for. If they express frustration, help them. And it will pull together what everybody is contributing there into a greater whole. All that stuff is that we can do now. You don't need even to marry into all of these cognizant ideas. You can just use group intelligence.
So if I'm a listener out there and I want to learn more, I can check out purplepill.vision. And are there any other links that people should check out if they want to play with Cognicisim or irises or related ideas?
The central hub is my Twitter, and they're like there is like all the code that I write is open source for anybody who wants to just do it too. It's interesting how rarely people do that. Like the original Cognicisim manifesto, it's on there. The code is on AWS for immediate deployment via button. So the best place is just go to Twitter speaker John Ash, because that's a hub.
Well, I will have those links in the show notes. So if you're listening, go to purplepill.vision, go to twitter.com/speaker John Ash. And thank you so much for the conversation, John. I'm looking forward to continuing to explore the convergence between these two idea sets.
Really excited to close back, and thank you so much for sharing this space. Discuss how we can use technology to regenerate.
Yeah, same. All right, thanks again, John. Peace and love.